All right. Hi everybody. I'm Doug. I'm from Wedge Lindale here in Minneapolis, and really kind of wanted to share. This whole process. This is something that happened pretty quickly in January, but the co-op, started preparing for this, months ago. So, the new administration in Washington D.C., kind of seeing the rhetoric coming from them, and kind of knowing, like Lisa mentioned, Minneapolis has been a hot point for a lot of activity. Kind of felt like we were going to probably see something down the road. And so the first thing we did is we started thinking about I've never thought about what we do if ICE or other sort of immigration enforcement comes to our stores. That's just not a grocery problem we've dealt with. And so started researching, looking into it, put together some thoughts, and we reached out in March of 2025. So pretty early on, we were talking to a lawyer, our representation, telling them kind of what we were worried about, what we were expecting. We had kind of a draft plan that I looked at the internet and researched it, and wrote something out, had some advice, and so we had kind of a baseline. Here's what they can do. Here's what they can't do. Here's what we can do. Here's what we can't do, and just kind of had that kind of in our back pocket. We posted it around the co-op, and just so there was kind of a framework. And I think a lot of that kind of preparation, what Lisa mentioned, we've been through a lot. I think a lot of the people in this room, we've all been through COVID, a lot of crises. And I think the number one learning from that experience, especially in Minneapolis with the uprising in 2020, is just an ounce of preparation, an ounce of just some sense of like what we might want to do or how we want to think about it goes a long way versus just making it up on the fly. That's very difficult. That leads to a lot of mistakes. And that did happen here because it was a really serious situation. But having that in our back pocket, knowing kind of the bones of how we want to respond and where our rights are as a private, a business with private property facing federal immigration, agents, we had that. And so that was really helpful. And I think the other part of that is, back in March, that was an opportunity for us to communicate with our staff. So we had this new policy. Staff were also asking about that. We talked to them, and that's just, and I think the other kind of, point that flows through this entire process is, engaging your staff and talking to everyone who works and everyone who's in this community was impacted by this in some way. And so by talking to them, they were able to either respond to it. And I think an example of where that kind of we came together and had a better result is, a lot of staff realized, hey, I work in the juice bar and we don't have an employees only sign by the juice bar. And so we realized that, all of our signage kind of delineating publicly accessible and employee only just needed to tighten that up a little bit. And so, and by doing that process, we felt a little more prepared. The staff, knew that we were thinking about this and had their backs and had our community's backs. And so really important to kind of have that phased approach, have that, and then be ready when things started heating up kind of early in 2026, we were ready to go. So next slide. Yeah. So in March. Oh wait. Oh, I'm sorry. I went too fast. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
think it makes sense, Doug. Just this is what you were just talking about here. This is the policy that
Yeah.
was developed in March and the employee only area signs that we put everywhere. Then Doug, do
Yeah.
you want to take phase two?
Yeah. So phase two. By October and November, we were really seeing businesses just down the street from us. It was not the huge groups of armed agents, but just lots of just hearing about it. Going, folks talking and asking about specific people in restaurants and other sort of, businesses in more immigrant heavy neighborhoods in Minneapolis. And really started realizing, okay, we've got this in our back pocket. We've got a framework. Let's start thinking about this a little more. And this is another example of where that staff engagement came in. They were telling us, they were hearing things about, staging in parking lots of like Targets or other, big businesses. And, we acted on that and made sure that we had signage in our parking lot. And a lot of that signage, we'll talk a little bit about that later. It's more about sending a message to our community of solidarity and, where we stand as a business and a member of this community. But really important to kind of engage with staff and have that out there. But really, started thinking more about this, hearing more about it, but wasn't really, didn't feel real yet because I don't think there was any real the surge had not happened, that rhetoric had not come, but we were already kind of in a heightened level of awareness of some sort of crisis heading our way is where we were at this kind of stage.
Thank you. So kind of the full on, like Doug was talking about, when we knew, and this probably it really started heating up in the early January timeframe, was definitely it was daily reports of things happening in the city and people being targeted actively, a lot of performative things going on in the media. And that was when we activated really our full crisis response mode. That included many components, and we realized right away that we needed to do daily leadership team huddles with what was going on. We did this also during COVID and during uprising here, and really needed to get on the same page quickly, compare notes, what was happening in the stores and in our city. We needed to update our door signage, create some staff specific instructions. We adjusted some policies, and then we just really started on the senior executive level. Nick, our CEO, was working with other higher level leaders at the co-op community about us starting to work together. So the pictures here, we started a whistle program in the store shortly after this time where we gave out free whistles for solidarity for our community and also gave out free whistles for customers. So we had a basket at the customer service desk and we've reordered, I think we've reordered, we've had about 2,000 whistles taken by our community and they really appreciated that. The sign shown here on the right, this was the next level of signage that we started putting on our all doors of no ICE access in this business. So taking it a little further than the parking lot signs that we had created. So yes, I'm kind of popping around here, but increased communication signage and staff instructions is what we did. So for that increased communication, not only did we do our leadership team huddles virtually to coordinate kind of our messaging and what our next steps were, we also did store team daily leadership huddles. So Doug and I, with our respective leaders, managers, assistant managers, and MODs, for that team to be pulled together every day at 2:00, it was really activating us as a group together. It wasn't just managers, it was our supervisors and everyone being involved in knowing what was going on that felt more together and more empowering that we were all getting the messaging together. It also helped in some ways to really control the narratives and the fear, to be naming what we were all going through in those leadership. And so we could make the call of what does leadership require in this situation among our staff and as we go out onto the floor. Doug and I both did daily floor walks, intentionally checking in with all the staff. You know, and that even went into how we interfaced with our customers. So during this time, it was really hard. Everyone, every day, it was a weight on every single person in our co-ops. And we even transitioned how we talk to customers. Instead of saying, "How are you today?" which felt really tone deaf when we started saying, you know, that automatic kind of script that we might all do, we started just greeting our customers with "Great to see you today." Those little tweaks and mentoring staff to do that help them feel really like authentic and really not ignoring the moment at hand either, which was really serious. All right, Doug, this one is you.
Yeah. So with the door signage, I think, this, like the nature of this, this particular crisis, with, the federal government and federal law, one recommendation, of course, is, we put these up and then we talk to our lawyer. And so, with when the consequences can be so severe, like, potentially being arrested or charged with federal crimes, definitely should talk to your lawyer and make sure what you're doing is right. And so kind of where that comes into play with this is we have these signs up. And a lot of our staff, and I'm sure you saw lots of examples of, businesses like turning ICE away or, just, locking the doors and only opening it for certain, people once they've been vetted. Those are all, tactics that other businesses use. We really thought, we can't really do that. Our lawyer said, it's a publicly accessible part of your building. They can come onto your property that's publicly accessible if they want to. And if you prevent them from doing so, or if staff does, or a member of the community or a shopper does, they're risking being charged with obstruction, which did happen in Minneapolis. And so we put these signs up, like I said, more as like, just a symbol of solidarity and an expression of where we were and how we viewed ourselves as like a safe place in a city under siege. And at the same time, like really being clear with employees, that this will come into play when we talk about some of our specific policies, but just like, do not, we don't want them. We're going to tell them we don't want them here. And we're going to show them these signs. We have these signs, but at the end of the day, like escalation is not something that we're interested in with these individuals for a whole host of reasons. And so really like, make that statement, be confident with it, but don't engage in anything physically, don't block them, don't impede them, and if they tell you to do something, you've got to do something. And so that kind of came into play, with eventually, things were really, really intense. Like this is after Renee Good was murdered. This is, things were, and that was just a few blocks from the Lindale store, about a mile away. And, things were very intense. And, realize that like, I'm going through my day and I'm like, I actually, what happens if they come into the parking lot or they're walking through our front door? Like we've got that policy from March that's kind of, high level, says like, don't talk to them about, these people do this, don't do that. But like, what actually are we going to do in the store in those, 10 minutes of the first 10 minutes that they're there? Like, what are we going to do? Because that to me felt like a situation that could easily get out of hand. We've got, dozens and dozens of employees in the store, sometimes, dozens and dozens of customers, and a pretty volatile situation. And, recognizing that there's probably not a lot we can do to control that sort of situation if, it starts happening, but wanted to develop something that at least we could talk to our staff and be like, here's what I need you as a floor level, like a grocery stocker, to be thinking about and doing. Here's what I need you as a manager on duty who bears some responsibility to what's going on in the store. This is what I want you to be doing. And here's what I'm going to be doing. And, and so we developed that. And so that's what these policies are. On the left is kind of the first one. And that was the one that we developed, pretty much, on our own, just based on like what we felt was right. And so, saying things like, we took a pretty, some would say a political stance on this. We were open and we were okay with, as a business, as a co-op, as a part of this community, telling our staff, if you need to get someone out of the store, like a customer, and they're worried about getting detained, you can take them and you can walk them through the back door. You can take them through employee-only areas, do whatever you need to do to keep them safe. If you're, and and all that kind of stuff. And that felt right, and that felt like the right thing to do. But this is where that legal counsel comes into play, where we talked about it, we showed this to her, and lawyers are going to be very, very conservative because they're protecting our rights. And kind of came back with like, hey, a lot of this stuff, if you're telling your employees you're going to be doing these things, you're telling them that they could be committing felonies and could get charged with obstruction of federal agents. And so we took this policy and, kind of the way we rolled it out, and it was an opportunity for us to, so we revised it and then really took that opportunity to walk through the store. And so, one part of this whole thing with this really heightened thing is just making sure that you're talking to the staff face to face was really, really important for both of our stores. Of just like, here's our policy, and like, okay, we changed it, like, and some, from one perspective, we watered it down. Like, we're not paging over the phone that ICE is in the store. We're not letting you walk people through the back door. We're not saying, we're saying don't blow the whistles in the store. And like, we're watering it down on paper, but here's why. It's not because we've changed our perspective on what ICE is doing in our community. It's not changed our perspective on whether or not we want them in our store or not. It's because we cannot tell you to do things that could get you charged with federal crimes. Like, we just cannot do that. I'm not going to do that. But then, so really, and talk that through. And some staff understood, some were frustrated. But I think, me and the other senior leaders of the co-op on the floor, in the juice bar, in the kitchen, in the produce back room, talking this through, answering their questions, was really, really important. It allowed them to kind of understand our perspective and have faith in the leadership of their co-op, that we were doing the best we could, that we were taking it very seriously, and we were doing everything we could to keep our community and our co-op safe. And so that was a really important part of this. And I think that really took a lot of the fears, a lot of the just the anxiety and the unknowns, and it made it more knowable and more, they could kind of get their hands around a little bit. So we did that.
Yeah, and I have a few stories to share, some learnings with some of these exact things that Doug is talking about. So One of them was kind of this transition from the um, more larger action policy on the left, and then after lawyer involvement, the one on the right. What I learned is I was really anxious to get the new guidance out because I was worried if someone, I didn't want to be, like Doug said, responsible for someone getting a felony or something really scary happening in the store if federal agents showed up. So I launched this to staff in a manager MOD huddle, everyone on site on a Friday afternoon. And then I was off on Saturday. And I was counting on those managers and MODs to really give the framing that I had given to them about, we don't want anyone in trouble. We don't want anyone arrested. Here's why these changes were. And that did not happen. And I was getting calls, as well as our CEO, Nick, on Friday night into Saturday about concerns about our changes and what we can't have people leave, and all sorts of questions that just really needed that in-person conversation. And I didn't go and tell everyone and give them adequate time to ask those questions, clarifying questions. It was a big lesson learned for me, that I should have known better, honestly, is never launch policy changes on a Friday. If you're not there the next day, that's a very bad idea, and it will go sideways. So big lesson learned, and we did recover from that on Saturday with a lot of contacting and calling and reassuring people. And then another lesson regarding staff that we learned here at Linden Hills is there's the policy guidance that we're giving, and then there's the natural inclination of people to want to go above and beyond, especially at our store, our MOD crew, which are not management, they're supervising the shift, but they're very attuned to safety. And we had a situation with a false alarm that was a big learning. And what happened was basically someone called the store, an outsider called the store and said, the ICE agents are across the street at a business across the street. So our MOD went outside, and nothing was visible outside, but a crowd was gathered because of a signal chat that had said ICE is on the scene. There was a report of a dark vehicle in that business's parking lot. There was a row of kind of townhomes nearby, and there was a Caucasian male walking to some doors that people thought looked suspicious. So then our MOD told our managers to call some of our staff that lived in the building to warn them. All this being said, all of this happened. The MOD also had somebody stationed at the doors. Don't let them in, is what they said. Don't let ICE agents in. Stay at the doors. Everybody was wanting to help. Everybody, was a buzz around the store that just went out of control within about 5 minutes. There was never any actual confirmed activity, and it was a panic created. So all for the right reasons, right? We're trying to keep people safe. That MOD at that moment was doing what they thought were absolutely the best thing to keep everyone safe. And it allowed us a chance to really explore what is actually happening, and as a leader, practicing discernment with introducing fear into the conversation and really keeping a level head, because that's our jobs, about what actually are we seeing here and what are our next steps. And it's different if someone is in our building or in our lot versus a rumor across the street. So that happening really early on allowed for a lot of resetting and continual conversation with those leaders and practicing those skills. Another one that happened right after that was dealt with in a better way by that same MOD because of that experience. Customer called the store and said, ICE is down the street at the Whole Foods, giving you a heads up. Then someone came in and said, yeah, I heard that too. I actually happen to know the store director over at that Whole Foods. I worked with them. I worked at Whole Foods in my past. So I texted them, hey, this rumor on the street, we're near each other. Let's keep each other informed. Are you okay? And they said, oh yeah, this isn't misunderstanding. We had a crew of people coming in to do some merchandising They were people of color, and they were walking all towards a back room, and people thought that because they were running to a back room, that they were trying to take cover. So again, another example of our community being so activated for everything, and everyone wants to do something, that the discernment just kept happening over and over again. And we just kept learning from it, and really keeping the communication on time and really tight together as leaders. So we did make some employee policy adjustments really in a targeted way, um, and really thought about it where how do we balance those policies with keeping open, which is, definitely our core principle of staying open for our community. So some of those policies we adjusted. Our attendance policy, uh, employees with any reason to believe that they were being targeted could take time off without attendance consequences. And we asked that that be really in communication with leadership. And it was for those folks who thought they were being targeted. We also offered transportation options and allowed staff to provide rides to our targeted employees just to support each other. And people were stepping up all over to do that and wanted to help. Also, community service hours. So we do have a community service hours program for nonprofits, and we offered to expand that to mutual aid efforts. The DFL Observer training or Monarcha training was one that we offered to pay community service if people would take that training. We offered paycheck advances with a longer payback time to ease any financial stress for people who needed to take extra time off. And also, we offered emergency transportation when ICE was spotted nearby at one of our business units that was actively happening more than once. And also time off for organized events in the community. We'll talk about one where we closed the co-op, our co-op community in a minute. Doug will take us through that. But just also, we've implemented a policy that if there are major organized community events, we have a structure in place that if you allow us notice, we will excuse that from attendance so you can do that work. Also, just a note in here that was a surprise for us, I would say, a pleasant surprise, is really, joining forces with UFCW, we're both of our stores are unions, just really opening up those conversations and phone calls with the presidents of those unions of how can we share resources, how can we support our staff, our community together. And that was a really pleasant surprise, and felt really great sharing those resources to staff and really just opening up the communication there. Okay, to Doug.
Yeah. So, this is, despite how heavy this topic is, how serious, how frightening, and how impactful it was, one thing that I felt, and this kind of extended throughout the entire period, was just, it was also like hopeful in a lot of ways in terms of just seeing how strongly, the broader Minneapolis and Minnesota community came together, and also the co-op community coming together. And, for me, it was just, it was just amazing to see, what, how I kind of phrased this with staff and how I felt about it was just like, this is, what we're seeing right now is co-op values, like in action, making a difference directly for our staff and for our community, just on an everyday basis. Like this is why we all are, this is why the co-ops exist. This is why we are here, is that this beautiful coming together and standing strong against challenges. Like it was really, that was what kind of got me through this entire period. It was just so hard, so stressful, so draining in every way possible. But just seeing how everyone came together in so many ways. And I think, one thing, just really recognizing, when Alex Preddy was murdered, and that was even closer. That was literally 6 blocks away from the co-op on a Saturday morning. And it was the day after, the day of justice. And just like, coming into the store just to be there with the staff, and like the CEO, Nick, and I were there, and just, it was so hard and so sad and so challenging, but just like, I don't know, just, it was just beautiful to see the co-op, stand up and stand proud and, represent its community values in a way, through that entire process and that entire experience. And so, really worked with the local co-ops. So there's, if you're not familiar, Minneapolis, Twin Cities, there's a ton of co-ops. There's 23 stores within 50 miles of our stores. And we just came together, and Nick was talking to the other GMs locally. We were sharing information and these policies together. And kind of had a joint approach of just like, this is what the co-op believes. Like we're gonna make this statement. We're standing up for the people of our community, the immigrants, the everyone who's a part of our community. We are with you. And made a joint statement. And I think one message here is, and learning is, part of one of the co-op's greatest strengths is our network of our community, and like our ability to bring all these people together and leverage that. And so roundup donations, food drives, all those sorts of things. Those are community action that happen because we're a co-op and because all these people who are like-minded, who want to support each other, are coming together. And so it was a beautiful, it was like kind of a bright light in a dark cloud. It was just seeing this co-op collaboration happen in real time and making real difference in the lives of people who were so affected. So that was a very beautiful moment, and that was great. And then that really crystallized, so on January 23rd, there was a national, or an ice out day of truth and freedom. And the whole city kind of came together, and almost every business closed down to give their staff time to do whatever they needed to do to feel right, and to feel better in this moment. And so the co-op, and my personal perspective is the co-op should never be closed unless there's absolutely no other choice. Like that is what we're here to do. We are here to be open for people, but to be a safe place, to be a place where people can get the food they need. So it's hard. It's a big deal to close the store, and definitely came around, and all the co-ops in the Twin Cities in their own way arrived at this decision to close and give space to their staff and to our communities to be a part of whatever they needed to be a part of. And I don't know if anyone in this room was part of that march. It was an absolutely amazing and beautiful experience. And one way the co-op kind of connected is we worked with NCG, based in St. Paul, just across the river, and Equal Exchange, and we just we had coffee for everybody as much as we could. I mean, 50,000 people showed up to this protest and this march, but we had hot coffee. It was -10. We had hot coffee at various places, and again, another experience of just that co-op difference and that co-op values making just a tiny difference. Just like giving someone who's shivering, it's -10, that there's just giving a little bit of hot coffee and a little granola bar. I mean, that's making a difference on this beautiful and important day. And just really thankful to the folks at NCG, to Equal Exchange. We also have a warehouse, CPW, that delivers produce to local co-ops, and they were a huge part of that. And we coordinated this all. And it was just, again, just, how hard everything was, that one day, those few hours were very beautiful and made it all kind of come together for us. And it was a life-changing experience.
Absolutely. So during this time as well, just want to shout out to a lot of fellow co-ops who reached out to us in the Twin Cities during this time. Definitely our CEO, Nick, has a lot more longer, deeper connections with people across the country, and he received a lot of support. And I want to give a particular shout out to Willie Street Co-op, who really just wow, we were blown away. They raised and donated $60,000 to the Immigrant Law Center and Groveland Food Shelf here in Minneapolis. Just amazing. So anybody from Willie Street on the call, thank you. Thank you so much. We're just so grateful. Thank you for your support. So here's just kind of our trying to get a summary together of, what we learned along the way. First being that cooperation, who we are as cooperators, really multiplies our impact. Our response absolutely had a greater impact when we came together, and cooperation among co-ops is really our superpower and sets us apart from other retailers. Secondly, really protecting the business mission. Well, we had made some shifts in our attendance policy. We kept our attendance policy. The primary way we support our community is by being open and keeping that in mind. We need staff here. So that is another lesson learned. Also, just number three, like we've talked about, creating staff guidance, making it clear, giving space for the time for that communication and the follow up as much as need be. Checking in with folks makes the difference in what your store will feel like and how people will feel supported. It's never going to be that you're going to have all the answers, but naming it and naming what we can do, kind of getting rid of ambiguity where you can, that helps with the anxiety and helps everyone feel united as a community together in how we're going to respond. Number four, leadership presence, so crucial. In tense situations, staff are going to get elevated. All of those fears are going to come up. Those in-person and one-on-one conversations calm and prevent overreaction. And when there is overreaction, allowing that time to be okay and downloading it and processing it together with the staff on how are we going to take that learning forward. Fifth, leading with your values. Don't be afraid to take a stand, involve shoppers in call to action with sharing whistles, doing food drives, doing a blood drive. Leverage your power of your community connection that you have. And then finally, tie in, don't try to lead. This was definitely a broader movement, and we wanted to amplify and support versus putting ourselves at the center of what this was. So in closing, I think, this moment really showed us what we all are capable of when our values match with our structure and care, and just realizing we're not going to get it perfect. Said early on that we need to be doing things and be thoughtful and intentional. It was really a reminder in times of crisis that how we all show up really matters. This is a quote that from Nick, our CEO, that I thought was really powerful. Was unlike the uprising after George Floyd, which was us against ourselves in our community. This was really an us against them moment, and demonstrated such an incredibility of Minnesotans to come together around a shared crisis. And we're all very, very proud of our community.